Nice to meet you, Nicole Walker. Awesome to meet you since knowing Greg, and it's been really cool to learn about your past experience with professional trail running and your world competition, and we've just spoke about your forensics history in the police, and I guess I really wanted to speak to you about how women can optimally train and be successful in sports or any sort of athletic career, and I suppose general well-being as well.
Yeah.
So awesome for you to come over and jump on the pod today and share your experience. If you just start off with 5 minutes about yourself and some background into what you're about, and also your business, Strong Wahine, Believe, Nourish, Move and Thrive.
Yep.
That's awesome for women to learn about now.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's start with I guess my background. Yeah, I started after high school, studied biology and then studied forensic science, and then ended up in police in a forensic role. And that was based in Wellington, and I was there for 11 years. Loved every minute of it. But alongside that career in police, I've always been an athlete and always been interested in health and well-being and sort of how to optimise that. So there sort of became a point where I wanted to go down that track and start my own business. And that's sort of what ended up happening in a bit of a roundabout way. I had a bit of a personal journey, and life sort of threw a few things at me. But eventually I found my way to women's, I guess, physiology and performance, or women's sort of health and well-being, and what that looks like from a being optimal perspective. So I actually found Dr. Stacey Sims, her work. She's got a book called Raw, and she's also got one called Next Level, which focuses on menopause. But she also has 2 courses which are a deeper dive on both of those things. So Women Are Not Small Men, and her Menopause 2.0 course, which I've both done. So, and I'm now currently studying under Molly Galbraith from a slightly different angle of a menopause coaching specialist. So I really moved into, I guess, a women's wellbeing space. And then last year, decided to launch Strong Wahine, which, is changing the paradigm in women's wellbeing with a holistic approach based on our unique physiology. And that holistic approach involves sort of 3 key elements. Mindset, which for me is our foundation. It includes awareness, gratitude, and belief. We then have movement, which is really anything you enjoy physically, at an intensity, lifting heavy, but we balance that out with what I call gentle movement. Things like easy days or things like yoga, Pilates, that kind of thing. And then the last element is nourishment. So nourishing the mind, body, and soul through nutrition, nature, rest, and self-care. So for me, those are the really key ingredients to thrive as a woman. And there are specific ways or things that we need to do within each of those to be optimal, either in well-being and or in performance. So today I thought we could sort of talk about sort of different aspects of those from a well-being and a performance standpoint, where what are some key things that we need to be aware of if we are an athlete, or even just for general well-being, that we can tweak or change to be more optimal as a woman. We know now from research based on women that we need to do things differently. In the past, the health and fitness industry has been based on male-dominated research. And then
in terms of nutrition, different, and training load differently, rest and recovery load differently.
Exactly. So it was then extrapolated to women, and we now know with research based on women that we need to do it differently if we are to be our best, because with our hormones we respond differently to those things. So
And you've learned a lot out of the 2 courses that you've done?
huge, yeah. For me, it was a real eye-opener, and some disbelief. I couldn't believe that all of my background, and I'll get to that in a minute, from an athlete perspective was based on male-dominated research. I just didn't know that kind of what was out there in the mainstream was. So just to kind of circle back, I've been an athlete my whole life, from team sports when I was young, and I've been very good at them, which is awesome. It's a thing that I loved. It was my thing. And then shifted into individual sports. So I did standard distance triathlon for a while, made it to world level, then changed into Ironman, podiumed at Challenge Wanaka, and then transitioned into trail running, which is my passion, still my love. It's my thing that I really enjoy. And I managed to go to Worlds and get a top 5 in that a few years ago. So, but I realise now that I can look back on my career and know that I haven't reached my potential necessarily, because one, was getting injured, and it was because I was basing what I was doing on male-dominated research. I was doing all the things women shouldn't do for their being optimal from a performance and a health standpoint. So it was things like intermittent fasting, low carbohydrate, excessive training, load, these things. But I thought that was what I should do because the literature said so. So for me, learning about this woman-specific stuff was massive, and it just showed me that actually, from a health perspective, I wasn't really in a good way. I knew my endocrine system was down-regulated. I effectively went into early menopause for 2 years. And so, yeah, now having an understanding of how I can tweak my nutrition and my training to know that I'm being optimal as a woman is really important. So maybe the first place to start with, what does that look like, is what I call adaptation to stress across our menstrual cycle. Just briefly, our menstrual cycle sort of is in 2 halves. The first half, from day 1 of our bleed to ovulation, is our low hormone phase. It's called our follicular phase, and it's where physiologically we're primed for hard work, heavy work. We're really good at adapting to stress. And the second half is our luteal phase, or our high hormone phase, where we're just simply not adaptable, as adaptable to stress, high loads, heavy work. So that's where, if we are training or racing in such a way where our training load is always high stress, or there's a lot of high stress across our cycle, we start kind of creeping into running the risk of increasing our injury. Because if we're constantly in a stress state or doing very hard or heavy or high workloads in our luteal phase, when we're not adaptable to stress, that is going to increase our injury risk.
Is that the second phase?
That's the second half of our phase.
Yeah. Over how long? 8-day period?
No, 28. Well, 28 is the average of women, but it can be from 21 even right up to 45. It depends. But if we kind of think of it in 2 halves,
a month.
Yeah. So, and it's
a long time to be wary of your load and
yeah.
Nutrition and rest you take in.
Yeah, it is. And but by understanding what that looks like, we can tweak things. So we'll have a look at quite a few things today around nutrition, around strength training, around supplementation that can help mitigate the risk. Because especially with professional sport now, for women, we know there's an increased training load. We know there's an increased general stress load from the very nature of professional sport. We know we're playing more games for longer in the year. So I like to see the menstrual cycle as an additional stress load. And if we don't take it into consideration, then it will lead to an increased risk of injury because it's an additional stressor, and there's only so much that our bodies can take. And so if we don't necessarily optimise for this, we are just increasing that risk.
For, I suppose, for rugby players and girls, a lot of them may have done a little bit of sports at school, but then when they get into the high club and professional scene, it's a new expectation on their bodies, so understanding this would be incredibly important. What are some of the, unless you wanted to go into something else, but how would you adapt the strength training components during your cycle?
Cool. So with strength training, that's a really critical part, especially for women. And I'll sort of probably leap into a little bit of injury risk. We'll get to that. So with strength training, again, we want to be, as women generally, whether we're athletes or not, lifting heavy. Most women don't lift heavy enough weights to, one, create a stimulus of strength. They just simply don't lift heavy enough. What is lifting heavy? Pick up a weight. Can you do 6 to 8 reps and you're struggling with the last 2? Perfect. That's the weight that we want to be using. We want to be doing that for 3 sets and then maybe 4 or 5 exercises. Something like that. But if we're doing anything higher than that as women, we're simply not creating the physiological stress that our bodies require based on our hormones that is going to, one, increase strength or power. So that's one really big one, is to get our head around, okay, actually we need to do it differently.
So you wouldn't be doing 12 to 15 reps,
No, and this is where this change in the paradigm comes from. Like So a lot of what I'll talk about today is literally pushing against the current paradigm in women's health and fitness.
Because that's specific to strength, but to build size for a girl that wants to play contact sport or something, can you still do that with?
Yes. So you would have a combination. So hypertrophy is still a thing, but ideally you would have it in combination with strength, because strength is in many regards more important, because then your body is resilient to, in rugby, being hit, rather than just simply size. So, but you can use both, but having that strength component is so important.
It's a good base.
Yep, as a good base. Yep, and it needs to be consistent. Like, yes, you will do more in the off season, like a heavier strength training program load, but it needs to happen right through the season, because you need to keep kind of maintaining that baseline level, so we know we're still resilient to that. So that's really important, lifting heavy.
As a woman, do you feel like you lose your strength quick?
So as women, as we age, yes. So after the age of 30, we start losing our muscle mass at a rate of 3% every decade if we do nothing to mitigate it. And that something to mitigate is lifting heavy. It's not enough just to go to the gym and lift weights. It's not enough just to go running. It's not enough just to do other sports. We actually need to create that physiological stimulus, which comes from lifting heavy, to be able to build that muscle. Women are very specific about what we need in terms of creating stimulus, and people just don't realise that.
And specific in terms of time frame in your cycle too. Can you lift heavy during the later periods of your cycle?
No, it's not advisable, because again, in the first half of our cycle, we are adaptable to stress. So this is where we want to lift heavy, and we want to do things like high intensity. So that's where, so we would effectively tweak that strength training. We're going to be in that even from 3 to 6, especially if you don't jump into it if you're not someone who's used to the gym, but that's where we want to hit those really heavy loads. And then in the second half, we could do things like 8 to 10, where that's using that as like a maintenance. And I guess you could do hypertrophy a little bit maybe, but you're not really going to build anything because you're not adapting.
It's quite specific too.
It is, and it needs, and for us it's just more looking at it from I tend to look at it like, okay, we've got 2 weeks to go heavy and go hard. And that doesn't mean to do it every day. No, we're still going to just do 3 to 4 strength training sessions, minimum of 2, and then, 3 high intensity sort of sessions. That's from a sort of a well-being perspective. Performance is obviously different, but that's where we can go harder. And then in our second half, we're doing we're going a bit lighter, and we're tweaking training to be a bit easier. So I see it as, okay, we've got 2 weeks at the, for the first half of our month, and then I just see that as a training program is like over 3 months effectively. So you're getting 6 weeks of work. Because the other important thing is that week before our period begins is when we're least adaptable to stress, and we're at the most risk of overstressing the body, and then therefore increasing our risk of injury. So again, just to be aware of that is where things like warming up and cooling down becomes really crucial. Recovery becomes even more crucial. Actually taking some easy days and resting, because you're not going to gain anything, but you may increase your injury risk. The one thing I will say is, this is what I'm talking about, is training or racing across a long period of time. So if you're someone who races periodically, like maybe once every couple of months, it doesn't matter when your race day falls in your cycle, because from a psychological standpoint, we know that can overcome most of this stuff. However, you would need to be aware that, again, like that I'll get into later, but the carbohydrate utilization is a key one. But it is, again, something else to understand how it works so that we can best mitigate these things for your situation.
What's a long-term career in racing, running?
It can be anything really. Like if you're professional, I mean, I was elite, not professional. It depends on people's injury sort of risk, I guess. Some people can be quite a long time, maybe like 10 years plus. It just depends how your body holds up. Yeah. But again, it's probably similar to professional sport. It's not that long.
Just the individual running is the contact things.
Yeah, that's right. So, of course.
There's contact sports players that play 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and there's just some people who are more resilient and less resilient. Yeah. That does, genetics come into it for sure.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good place to look at injury risk.
Yeah, awesome.
Let's maybe concentrate on two sort of ones that seem to be quite prevalent across a range of women's sports, not just contact sports, and that's ACL injuries and concussion. So ACL injuries, let's have a look here. Women are, more at risk. And there's a number of reasons.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So one of them is actually a hip angle. Just puts more pressure on that part. We have a greater level of inflammation anyway, especially in our high hormone phase. So there's actually a sort of a shift in our, what do we call it? Immune system shift. So that effectively, in our low hormone phase, lowers inflammation, increases immune cell activity, which that is the thing that creates this resistance to stress or being more adaptable to stress. So the opposite is true in our high hormone phase. The shift increases inflammation and decreases our adaptation to stress.
Which is the later part of your
Which is the
cycle.
later part, yeah. So with ACL risk, not only is it that Q angle, there's a high hormone phase, so we're particularly, the risk increases more in our high hormone phase. The other thing is our ligaments and tendons become a bit more elastic, so they're not as stable. So that's another thing we need to take into consideration. However, there are things that we can do to mitigate that. And for women, core strength, and that's defining core, which is everything but your head and your limbs. So it's from here to your hips. It's not just your core, it's shoulders, glutes, back, and your abdominals. So strengthening those specifically is really, really important. We call that sort of our steering wheel, because if those things are not strong, it puts excessive load on our knees, but muscles, they just can't do their job effectively, which creates more risk. Things like walking lunges. So there's an injury prevention protocol, and it includes walking lunges, single leg toe raises, which is like a calf raise but standing on one leg, not holding on to anything, bridge, alternating hip flexion, and planks. So planks are a really critical one. One, they lengthen us, but two, they actually hit all of those parts, glutes, back and core. So incorporating planks 3 or 4 times a week, side planks as well, is really crucial to kind of strengthen those. One really cool kind of way to assess whether you're at a greater risk of ACL injury is jumping off a box. So if you sort of look at yourself or video yourself or get someone else to look, if you jump and then you notice your knees cave in, even slightly, that's a red flag to say that you are at the moment at an increased risk of ACL injury. And that's because your glutes are not turned on and you're quad dominant. So again, it's putting excessive stress on that part of us.
What type of exercise would you want to try and do to fix that?
Glute specific work.
Strengthen your glutes.
Yep, strengthen your glutes in a functional, whatever sport you're doing, in a functional way.
Lunges and things
Yep.
like that.
Yeah, so that
Agility stuff for rugby players. Or...
Yep. Yeah, so there's also actually, and I just want to name them because I think it's kind of important and people can look this up for themselves.
Cool.
But there's actually how many is there? 1, 2, 3. There's 8 other assessments you can do to see your ACL risk as well. And these are looking at your foot type, and I won't go into details, but flexibility, how flexible you are, whether you're quad dominant. I was talking about landing stability, the box thing, glute strength, core strength, leg dominance, and squat form. So these are just other indicators of whether you're at a heightened risk as well. So we actually know quite a lot about this risk, and so we can do a lot of things to mitigate.
The crazy thing, I guess, for a woman is that specific to the cycle time when you're at higher risk, which you've got to sort of manage yourself more closely than a male, I guess.
Yes, yep. So if you're in that high hormone phase and you've got rugby, you've got a game on Saturday, we've got training or any other thing, there's a couple of really important things that we need to do. Warming up, have a really proper functional warm up.
Say you're a rugby player,
Yep.
you've got your period coming up and you're 3 days out.
Yep.
How do you prepare to
So there's a few things.
perform optimally?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be fatigued and buggered, eh?
Yeah. Not necessarily, yes. You are not necessarily fatigued and buggered,
Okay.
but it just, exercise does feel harder.
Yeah.
But there are things we can do. So one to mitigate, we'll just talk about ACL risk for now. Warming up, have a really good functional warm up. So targeting those glutes, targeting that core, really important. So that we're not putting, again, excessive stress on the system if it's cold. Incorporating into our training, and particularly our strength training, balance work. Because again, it's strengthening that core, it's strengthening all of those other smaller muscles and ligaments around that area to stabilize as well. So often we overlook kind of the smaller stuff, which are actually in many cases more significant. So balance work is really crucial, and that can be any type of balance work, just whatever it is, standing on one foot, eyes closed, doing something. And that really will help that stability as well. So those are a couple of key things in terms of ACL risk injury, and I just want to make sure I've got them all. Yep. Cool, so that's ACL stuff.
ACLs are common in rugby players.
Yes, yeah, any contact sport, also any sports
For
which
women,
change direction. Basketball, netball, hockey, things
So
like
women
that.
are more susceptible to ACLs than men.
Yep, we're about, what is it, I think 3 to 8 times more susceptible, I think
Shit,
is,
that's a lot.
yep, depending on what sport you play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Because we're smaller, our ACL ligaments are smaller as well, that has an effect. But at least by implementing some of these mitigative strategies, we know we're doing at least all the right things. It's not going to be, we're not going to not ever get them, but it might decrease our risk of Yeah, and if it does, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think
It's
to
going
me,
to improve your performance anyway.
Yeah.
Improving strength and core strength.
yeah, exactly, is crucial.
Inflammation in the brain is a common thing. Is that the concussion perspective?
Yeah, so let's kind of move into that, because
Yeah,
that's
cool.
a really good sort of segue into inflammation.
And why it is. And does that change over your cycle?
Yes. Yep.
True. So at the end of your cycle, there's more inflammation.
Yep. So as I said previously, we have a high level of systemic inflammation just everywhere in that high hormone phase, and it includes our brain.
Yeah.
So when we are looking at because of that increase in inflammation anyway, we're actually at sort of a 50% at a 50% greater risk of concussion than men. So it is far greater, and that it is to do with inflammation. So we also seem to be more vulnerable to post-concussion syndrome and post-concussion migraines, and again it's related to that increase in inflammation, because we know from concussion that increases inflammation anyway. So because we have a higher level of baseline, we go that much higher once the concussion happens. So again, recovery and what we do immediately after is really important. And I'll maybe talk about at the end, but there is a supplement that we can use on a consistent basis that helps with this lowering inflammation thing, and we'll talk about that soon.
Cool.
So based on research, and there's a clinic here in this country which has some really good information on recovering from concussion. So they actually list, I think it's 10 supplements or things we can do immediately after concussion that significantly decrease the effects of concussion. So things like inflammation, decreasing that is the main one, because that's one of the big things that is affected. So I'm just going to list them so that people are aware. Protein, so increase our protein, particularly for women, and we'll talk about protein later as a general thing, but that's really important. No simple carbs or sugar, again, because those increase inflammation and we're trying to decrease it.
What would you increase your protein levels to?
So for women, our baseline protein levels as an athlete is between 2 and 2.4 grams per kilo of body weight. And that changes between a harder day and an easier day, but that's our range. So I would up it to that higher end, even a little bit more if possible.
Yeah.
But you want to get some good quality protein, whether that's whey, whether it's a protein powder, it's probably the easiest way to get that in right away.
Oh yeah.
Vitamin D3, 5,000 international units. So you can get these supplements, at your local health store. Omega-3s at 4,000 milligrams a day, glutathione at 100, magnesium 200, resveratrol 500 milligrams, cytokine 1850, zinc 40, and curcumin. So it's kind of a cocktail of massive anti-inflammatories. The other one that I would add to that list is creatine, and we will talk about that soon. Again, it's a massive anti-inflammatory, and it's also neuroprotective, so we'll get to that. No alcohol, TV, even phones, anything bright lights is also going to affect, and basically sleep as much as possible. So I would highly recommend people have somewhere they know they can get these things, because it just makes such a difference when we know we're getting everything that we need to decrease or increase our recovery from concussion.
And that might change depending on what time of your cycle is, or
Yep.
say that's the baseline supplements that you can take.
So that list is directly after concussion. So we know that if you are concussed in your luteal phase, your high hormone phase, you're actually at a greater risk of post-concussion syndrome and in worse migraines as well. And that's again the increase in inflammation. So it's why it's important, of course, but it's even more important when we're in that phase. So just to be aware. But I would, really encourage people to take a note of that list. And
do you know what those supplements do?
yeah, I'm not individually, but
Okay.
I know the basis, and it literally is all to do with decreasing inflammation.
Yeah.
Because we know that if we can get that under control faster, then the brain can start
Relieve
doing
the
its thing.
symptoms, okay.
Yeah. Maybe we could move on to fueling, because that might.
Nutrition.
Yeah, let's have a look at nutrition.
Okay.
I like to kind of think of it as fueling for what we're doing.
Specific to your sport.
Yeah,
duration.
and our cycle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because we know, again, our hormones affect how we utilize things like carbohydrates and the need for protein. So let's start with protein. To me, for women, that is the most critical macronutrient. One, because we need it to build muscle. We need it to build strength. Also, most women don't have enough of it.
True.
It's
yeah,
the one
it's not
macronutrient,
really-
because people just automatically think, I've just got to eat a ton of meat. No, you don't. However, if you're vegan or vegetarian, it is far more difficult to get the required amount of protein, especially if you're an athlete, because you've got to literally eat a far greater volume of things, and that can be challenging. However, I'm a big fan of using protein powders to especially recover from your sport, whatever that is, all the hard efforts, whether it's a game, whether it's training, because then you know you're getting all the amino acids, you're getting everything you need to recover optimally. And that can be either way. Whey is the gold standard, it has everything we need at the optimal levels. However, if you're intolerant to whey, or you just simply don't like it, or you are vegan, then you can use plant-based. I use plant-based because I'm slightly sensitive to it. I use Radix because I know that their profile is exactly what I need, and they have a base of 2 different vegetarian proteins. And
Are you
that's
vegetarian?
no, not
Okay.
vegetarian. I'm
Good.
just slightly intolerant. to
Oh, to a normal protein milk type of.
Yeah, like I think it's probably the casein in it.
Okay.
Normally, yeah. But for me, that's super important. The other thing I'll say about protein for women, for recovery, and this is huge. So we actually have a 30-minute window after we finish hard effort, whether that's training or racing or playing a game, to recover. Men have got 3 hours. We don't have that luxury.
It's a huge difference. Yeah.
So it really means that we've, one, got to be organised, but two, if we don't get our recovery within that time frame, we're simply not adapting to any of our training or racing. Again, we're increasing that stress load because we're not adapting, so our muscles, are becoming more and more damaged. You're just kind of layering on the damage, and at some point your body's going to say, I've had enough, and you'll get injured. So just bear in mind, that's critical. And I would recommend the protein powder approach. You can just make it before you leave, and it's there in your gym bag or your rugby bag or whatever the thing is. Add some carbohydrates, whether it's banana, don't add antioxidants, don't add berries. That blunts our adaptation to training unless you're doing things like a tournament. That's crucial. Carbohydrates, the big one. The other thing about protein, we need to increase it in our second half because our body's using protein to build our uterus lining. So we need to increase it in that phase as well. So just bearing that in mind, have a little bit more, especially if you're training in that phase.
So if in the later part of your cycle, you just generally eat more protein.
Yep.
To supplement for that.
For that, because your body's using up more
Oh,
to
That's
create that
interesting, yeah.
lining. Yeah. Same with carbohydrates. So let's move on to carbohydrates. Kind of the baseline for carbohydrate intake is 2.5 grams to 3.5 grams per kilo of body weight. So it's individual to each person, and that's another big one. That range is to kind of equate for easier days and then harder training days. So you'll be at the top end or the bottom end. And those carbohydrates should be ideally from kind of whole grains, not from simple carbs. Try and limit your gel intake to just your race or your game, because again, they wreak havoc on our gut. And they're just not that good for us. If we can get things through real food, do it. If gel's the only option, then okay. Try and go for one that doesn't have multi-dextrin. That's a challenge. But if you can, do that. Again, it'll lower our GI distress potentially. Again, with carbohydrates, increase those in the luteal phase, the second half, because your body's utilising those as well. The other really important thing from an athlete perspective, if you're training or racing or having a game in that second half, our body's ability to effectively use stored carbohydrate effectively decreases. So it's very hard for us to access stored carbohydrates. So we effectively need to get more of it externally. So whether that's in a game, whether it does need to come from a gel or something else, then just understanding that we need to keep those carbs coming at a consistent basis. Otherwise we will potentially run out quicker. So that's another really important
point. How did you eat before your races? So the Ironman, do you remember that? Or
yeah, in Ironman, I would just have a shake because that was easier to digest, and that was just like a banana. And so the other thing is, the thing you eat before racing or a game, you're not actually utilising that from an energy standpoint. Maybe if for Ironman it'll be like at the end of the day, but not for just a game that's like 2 hours or less or a thing. It's actually the night before because it's a stored glycogen. Carbo loading is not really a thing for women. You don't need to go crazy with the pasta and all the things. You just need to, I would more go down the line of like kumara, because it's more of a complex carbohydrate the night before, and have one of those and you would have topped off your tank, and then in the morning you top it off again slightly. So there's no need for men, different story, they respond differently to that, but women don't really need to. Hydration is more of a key. Last macro before I get off track is fat. Again, really important. We need good quality fats for a bunch of systems in our body to be optimal. We kind of look at that as sort of 30% of our daily intake of food, and try and aim for the good quality, things like avocado, nuts and seeds, coconut oil, these types of things. Stay away from anything seed oil based. Again, that just increases our inflammation, something we don't need at all. So from a nutrition standpoint, those are some of the keys just to tweak around our cycle.
Cool. How's it changed? How's your perception on nutrition changed since you were training?
Massive. So I think, as I said at the start, I went through a phase of low carbohydrate intake, and then on top of that did intermittent fasting as well.
Or was that to lose weight or try and get into a...
No, it was more about fat burning.
Fat burning.
Because I thought that was how you created metabolic flexibility. What you do if you're a man, but you don't if you're a woman. So I would just like to cover that quickly if we can, because at the moment it's a big thing. So intermittent fasting for women is a no-go. All of the benefits that are out there, things like... It's
really common in men at the moment, eh?
Yeah, and that's fine. You guys can do it.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So you get all of the benefits. Things like cell turnover, an increase in metabolic flexibility, decrease in inflammation, these things that people want. However, for women, it's the complete opposite. We increase our inflammation, we increase our ability to store fat. The autophagy cell turnover is negligible. You don't really get that either. So there's far more, and then we're also down regulating our endocrine system, which is our hormone system. However, the good thing is, for us women, we can get those same benefits. We just don't do it through intermittent fasting.
Which would be weight loss, cell rejuvenation.
Yep.
So, okay, what would...
Yeah, and then also body composition changes, but also metabolic flexibility, all of these
What's
things.
metabolic?
The ability to go from using glucose as a fuel to using fat as a fuel.
Okay.
Kind of, yeah. So you should be able to kind of do exercise for a certain amount of time and you sort of switch over and not bonk.
Okay.
Yeah, so people who aren't metabolically flexible will rely on glucose, so simple carbohydrates, and then once they sort of run out of what's on board, they'll hit the wall.
Crash. Oh,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Whereas other people will change into fat burning and then you can go longer.
Okay.
So it's a more efficient system, but it's slower. So it's only efficient for sort of endurance when you're at a lower intensity.
Right.
But for women, we get those same things through high intensity interval training, heavy strength training, and plyometrics. So we have things we can do. It's just they're
You can
different.
still be flexible.
Yeah, and we're actually women, and many people don't know. Women are biologically better at burning fat anyway. We're basically always at our maximum fat burning capacity, and that's just due to our hormones. But people don't realise that. Obviously, lifestyle has a huge impact. If you're someone who eats a lot of simple carbohydrates or highly processed foods, then you're not going to be metabolically flexible because that is going to affect those systems. It's going to affect
And do you want to touch on the type of simple carbohydrates?
Yeah, so these are things like anything highly processed food, things that are come in packets, fast food, anything white-based, white bread, white potatoes. White potatoes are not necessarily the demon. They can be good, but we call them nutritionally kind of insufficient. White rice, these types of things, versus complex carbohydrates are things like whole grains, so brown rice, quinoa, carbohydrates from vegetables, kumara, any root vegetable, things like pumpkin, carrot, parsnip.
It's quite an easy thing to change in your daily meal intake too, and it's nicer.
Yep.
It's a bit better.
Yeah.
Nutrition.
Well, you've got more
specific for
nutrition.
women.
Yeah, and specific woman. Exactly. It's like you're getting what you need. So it's for me it's hugely important to just to understand the effect of your nutrition on what's going on physiologically.
Yeah.
And so if you are a professional athlete, if you're any athlete who wants to be optimal or get the best of themselves, then just understanding that there are things that increase our inflammation or increase stress. And so, you're doing yourself a disservice. So for me, understanding that I was doing all those things, yes, I still had success, but I know that I didn't reach my potential. So now having shifted to that, and it was a real journey. I went through body image issues because I was this tiny thing when I was trail running, and now, I'm far more muscular, all of these things. And so for me, going through that's huge to just get it in my head that was okay. And I know now I'm comfortable in who I am in my space. But I'm a mesomorph, so I build muscle easily even though I'm not in a muscle building.
What did you say you were?
A mesomorph. It's a type of body type,
Okay.
which builds muscle quite easily. And so that's just a fact. I'm not trying to build muscle, I didn't, but that's part of doing any kind of strength training for me. And so I've just had to take that on board, like this is just your kind of set point, and that's okay. The biggest thing I've noticed is, yes, my overall well-being is far greater. I've moved away from kind of competing. I will in the future, but I just haven't found kind of anything that I want to do yet. so we'll see. But that's kind of where that's sort of come from, I guess, for me, from that standpoint.
So how has your well-being changed from learning experiences from your trail running career and the maybe disappointment from not quite competing as well as you would have liked to?
Yeah.
How has it changed your mindset and well-being? And because that's what you do with your Strong Wahine group.
Yeah. So this is why this change in the paradigm for women's well-being is the core of what I'm doing, because I know to be optimal as a woman, we need to do it differently. So I know now that everything that I'm doing, and I'm doing it from a well-being perspective, because that's kind of my focus at the moment. But if it was performance or it being competitive, then it's the same. It's just tweaking, right? You have a more kind of specific training program, I guess. But for me, it's just knowing that I am being optimal, that I'm doing my strength training, that I'm getting high intensity in, that I'm doing plyometrics, that I'm building my bones. That's the other really key one. and important for women. So it's just a different mindset around.
And the balance you must be getting right to look after your mental health and
Yep.
the pressure of trying to be an athlete
Yeah,
or sustaining your muscle mass and
Yeah.
strength training, because a lot of women don't have that mindset like men do, where we do it, we're keen to go to the gym and be active. We're
Yep.
like a different type of breed, really.
yeah,
But as a woman, how do you do that? How do you sustain balance and sustain the competitiveness to continue to gym, train, be active? How do you get that balance right?
yeah. I think it's about starting with what is the kind of goal or goals of what you're doing.
Yeah, I suppose the nourishment, can we touch on that? Because that's
Yeah.
really important to sustain long-term
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah. So for me, I said at the start, but nourishment involves that nutrition, which we've talked about, nature, and sort of rest and self-care. So those are the three. Even if you're a professional athlete, like nature to me has got so many benefits. You're outside, we know the benefits of that, increase in mental health, decreasing the stimulus of modern life, automatically decreases stress levels, connecting to nature. For me, I'm most at peace in nature. I feel a deep connection. Just being out there kind of centers me.
You do a lot of hiking, kayaking.
Yep, and that's for my, mental and spiritual health. I like to call it nourishing my soul, because I know I need it. It needs to balance out all of the physical things that I'm doing. So for me, encouraging people to get out of nature as much as possible.
How do you think that changes your perception of things like mistakes or setbacks?
I think it's huge. So we talk about resilience, and that is a huge part of being able to learn from things that don't go the way we thought they might, or from, people might call them a setback. If we're not necessarily have a resilient kind of base or a mentally strong, which is, similar, then we tend to look at it more from a negative perspective. Like, why did it happen to me? Why now this, that? Look at all the things that you miss out on. However, we know with everything, there's a lesson to be learned here. And whether it's, okay, maybe I did overstress the system. Maybe I need to dial back what I'm doing. Maybe I need to increase things like going out in nature to nourish my soul or increase my mental capacity, mental health. Is it I need to do more gentle movement within this? Do I need to increase that a little bit? So I think it just gives you another perspective, or a more holistic perspective on what you're doing. It's very easy, especially if you're a professional athlete, to be consumed or all consumed by the thing you're doing. I like to think of it as like chapters in a book. Like the athlete, that's just one chapter in your book. You need to have other things that you enjoy outside of being a professional athlete. And I really encourage people to find what that is. It doesn't, whether it's like painting, whether it's hiking, whether it's kayaking out in nature, whether it's playing the piano, like doesn't matter what it is, you need to have something else around other than the thing you're doing, because it doesn't last forever. That's the other one, and if you do get severely injured and your career's cut short, then what are you going to do? So that's really important, to create that holistic mindset, which is where that balance comes in. It's why self-care is so important. What are the things that you need to ensure you're physically at your best, you're mentally at your best, you're spiritually at your best, emotionally at your best? Think about those things that we need to balance let's call it the physical part of what we're doing, which is our sport. Because if we don't have that balance, then again, we're increasing that stress load and therefore increasing that injury risk. So it's just about having a more holistic point of view on your well-being, and that one chapter in your book is professional athlete.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's how you keep maybe sustain the balance mindset. But how do you get as a woman, and like you were successful with your racing, how did you get that committed and I suppose driven as a woman athlete?
So for me, I guess I've always been competitive. Having done being a competitor, I've got a twin sister. So we were competing right from when we were little against each other. And so I think that's kind of ingrained in me, that competitiveness, which then as I went through all the different sports that I played, I just found, I guess, a goal, like, was it qualifying for Worlds, was it podiuming at something or other, whatever, or simply on top of all of that, it was actually getting the best of myself. How can I run my best race? How can I, that was
Did
my...
that mindset develop? Did you get to that stage over a time, or did you always have that?
No, that's probably always been, my focus
Racing
is,
against yourself, that's quite a good mindset.
yeah, well, because I have a twin sister who was sort of in many ways slightly better than me when we were younger. So kind of always chasing her, but I always had the self-belief that at some point I would do my thing, and I would win. And it happened a few times. So for me, it was more, I guess, probably from that I had the mindset of, I want to do my best on race day, whatever that looks like. And I'm going to do the training, nutrition, rest, all of the things that I think I should be doing to get there. And so that's kind of where my mindset was. And then if they happened to be winning, awesome. That was great. But it wasn't necessarily my focus.
It wasn't the overall outcome.
No, because I know there's uncontrollables on race day.
Of course, yeah.
Doesn't matter what training I've done, does not guarantee me anything.
Yeah.
And I've had races where didn't feel awesome. Yes, still managed to podium, but I should have won. I know if I was at my full potential, I would have won. So, but if I had got in that kind of like rabbit hole of shoulda, coulda, woulda, then it's just a dangerous place to be, because at the end of the day, I can't control what happens on race day. All I can do is like, what's my body giving me today, and get the maximum out of it. And if that's good to win, perfect. If it's good to get third, if it's last, so be it. Do you know what I mean? And so that mindset, I feel, is really important to have as an athlete.
Yeah, it takes away the stress and expectation you can put on yourself quite a bit, eh?
Yeah, and I know being a professional athlete, like, that is your job. And that automatically places an added layer of stress, which
might not help to performance all the time.
No, and that's the
Constant.
kind of narrow-mindedness we can get into, is because we come at it from that, well, it's my job, I need to just go, 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 go. Especially when we see men do it. Go, 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 go. And maybe it works for them, maybe it doesn't too. But if we do it, there's a point at which it won't.
Yeah.
You can't beat your physiology.
Yeah, true.
And so at least having an awareness of is going to increase at least increase the possibility of your longevity in a sport.
How's, what stage you're with Strong Wahine, and what are you looking to provide in terms of helping women?
So
any ages too?
Yep.
Would you go teens up or?
Yep. Yeah, because for me it's important. We know we need to work with we need to do certain things with our menstrual cycle, which we've been talking about today. But then when we move into menopause, it's different again. And we won't get into that today, but maybe another day. And so for me, I want women to be optimal at every stage.
Yeah, especially in the elderly stage, you don't want to wither away with age and
because
juggling your cycle.
As women, we're actually in a unique position where we can see our future. If we don't mitigate things, we know what that's going to look like, and it's frail and not being able to do anything. So it's kind of cool in some regards. But for me, Strong Wahine, yes. Personal training, because I know a lot of people need that one-on-one support, especially for women. Most women, the gym is a foreign thing. But I highly encourage people to step outside their comfort zone. I had to do it. This is my 4th year at strength training, and I literally spent the first year fearing going. My heart rate would increase, but I did it anyway. Yes, I had Greg there for support, so I encourage people to have support, which is why I'm the support too. But it's that thing of pushing through, because I know I need to do it for me as a woman to be optimal.
I think it's awesome that women go to the gym, and it shouldn't be daunting because it is so foreign, but especially if you can get all the benefits with, I think that the well-being and self-confidence is incredibly important.
Huge. I always say strong body, strong mind.
Yeah.
Because it is a thing.
Building strength to have more stamina and mental health.
Yeah, and it is strong body, strong mind. Like, you feel good in yourself, you feel strong, you automatically feel good in mentally. Like, that is a thing, and so it's another reason why I encourage it.
And you're doing yoga with strong Wahine, is that connected or?
No, that's no, not directly. So
Yeah.
I encourage people to do yoga as a basis for that gentle movement, balancing a high intensity and heavy lifting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a hugely important part of also mental health. There's so many benefits in that regard. But for me, understanding that holistic approach of mindset, movement and nourishment. So advice and programs around how do we incorporate that into our everyday lives, whether we're an athlete or whether we're focusing on well-being.
Or even optimizing your friends and family relationships.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, and that's our environment.
Yes, exactly,
that
yeah.
is hugely important,
Yeah.
environment, because that influences our physiology as well. And so, and I talked about that recently on one of my posts, was values, and environment has a huge role to play there, because if we're constantly being bombarded by negative messaging or things that don't align with our values, then it's very hard to change things if that's the case. So,
Getting confidence to go to the gym.
Exactly. Like, and the other thing for women, get out of the comparison trap.
Yeah.
Of like, women should look a specific way. No, they shouldn't. We know there's at least 3 different body types. I'm a mesomorph, we've talked about that. There's ectomorph and endomorph. It's about health and well-being. It's about, am I doing everything from a nutrition, nourishment and movement standpoint as a woman, and for my specific lifestyle and unique situation?
How would you gauge that energy?
How would you gauge being optimal?
Yeah.
I guess looking at your current lifestyle, what are your goals in relation to those things, or it might just be one, and then going, okay, well, how can we optimize? How can we decrease stress? How can we give you more energy?
High energy.
Yep. How can we get you sleeping better? We'll touch on sleep in a minute. How can you have more energy across the day? How can you be more vital and vibrant on a daily basis? Being able to, like, mental capacity, increasing your mental capacity. Am I always on the kind of brink of
Sleep.
no, not that too, sleep, but also on the brink of, uncontrolling our emotions.
Anxiety or something.
Anger,
Anxious,
anxiety, being anxious. Yeah, those things. So it's looking at life as a whole, I guess, and just seeing how we can tweak things around our cycle to better optimize. And that could be... Cool. So the other sort of reason is, looking at the women that I train and seeing the benefits of what they're getting out of it. And it's been incredible to me just to see how varied that is. So one of the ladies who's in her menopausal years and just started strength training, and just seeing, the confidence in her. She's never done it really before. And I'm sort of personal training her, so me being there with her has just given her the confidence to actually lift heavy. She said on a number of occasions, like, I wouldn't have been able to do that if you weren't here. And that was simply me giving her the support and encouragement to know that, yes, you can. You are strong enough, and to give it a go. And just hearing her say, I wouldn't have been able to do that without you. Like, that's huge, and that's why support is so crucial, because it's really hard to push ourselves when we're sort of in fear or we're uncertain about something. And if we're in that space, we're just not going to get the most out of it. So, and it just, for women who experience that, it just is so much confidence, because, like, I can do it. when they just thought they couldn't.
How old was that woman that's in the
She's 50.
And how do you change her training regime to suit her stage in life?
Yep.
Menopause.
Yeah, so
Does
the
that
reason...
fluctuate in symptoms, or is that a time period?
Yeah, it's a transition. So with menopause, you know, we go through the first stage, which is a time of, you know, sort of heightened symptoms, and I won't get into the specifics, and then it sort of moves through. But in menopause, like we said before, that decrease in muscle and bone density significantly decreases.
Drops off, yeah.
So even though as a woman after 30, it starts happening, there's a really big drop if we don't mitigate, which is why she started lifting heavy.
Is she the oldest woman you've been training? Or?
Yep, yeah, I've got quite a few around that same age.
Yep, that's cool.
But it's the same thing. It's understanding that she needs to do that to be optimal. For her in this case, it was her sport. So she knew that that was going to make her better at her sport. And so she was open to doing that. But yeah, for me, just seeing that in women, and like with the other women I've trained, they just don't realise.
Specific to weight training.
Yeah,
Strength training.
lifting heavy.
Yeah.
That's 6 reps or less. And for menopause women, it's between 3 and 6. It's super heavy.
Yeah.
And that can be intimidating because most women have never got close to that. But again, everyone starts somewhere. What's heavy for you or heavy for me is completely different, and that doesn't matter. If it's heavy for you, it's heavy and you're creating that stimulus. So that's where the importance is. You're building muscle. Because without it, you won't.
Are you helping them and suggesting supplements for them as well?
Yep, yeah. So depending on what their goal is, we will talk about those 3 key elements: nutrition, movement, and mindset. And we incorporate things like recovery, protein is the most important, but we look at things like supplements. What are going to aid you in your goal? What are going to help with particularly menopause symptoms? So that's a whole other sort of topic. But we look at all the different aspects because, again, it's that holistic approach. It's so important to take in a holistic approach to be able to get one. In menopause, it's mitigating symptoms, it's maintaining bone and muscle, which is important. So that's our focus. But then we swing kind of back into teenagers. That's a whole other thing.
Rejuvenate yourself.
Yeah, it's about, again, in teenage years, what are we trying to do? One, we want to keep moving. We know that physical and mental health benefits are huge. There was a study in the last 5 years, I'm pretty sure 2019, which looked at why there's this drop in particularly young girls doing physical activity across the board. Why are we seeing this significant decrease? You know, when they've played or been doing some form of exercise, and then in our teenage years we don't. Yep, national study around New Zealand.
Specific to women.
So it looked at the barriers to that. What are the potential barriers to why girls don't seem to be continuing engaging in physical activity? So one of them was that a high percentage of girls didn't want to participate in what they call traditional sports. So things that mainly like team sports, netball, basketball, rugby, da-da-da-da-da. They didn't not want to do physical activity, but they wanted to do something that, one, wasn't competitive or in that traditional sense. The competitiveness of traditional sport was what was putting them off. It wasn't doing physical activity, but it was that part.
That's what came out of the study.
Yeah, that was one of them. There's a whole bunch of others, but that was kind of one of the real key ones.
Yeah.
So again, for me, with Strong Wahine, a part of what I do is high intensity interval training, circuit training in nature, because we know the benefits of nature. So it gives us, again, that what I call more than movement. So
more than movement.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, because we're getting the physical benefits of high intensity interval training, plyometrics, but also nature. We're getting that mental and spiritual connection, that rejuvenation that nature gives us. And actually, when I do it out in Little Kaiteri, which is where I do it with the women I train now, we also jump in the sea after. So we're getting cold immersion. So it's kind of creating this wee community. So for younger women, I feel that type of movement could be a really good option because it takes away that competitiveness. Everyone works at their own pace, they do their own thing, but in a group setting, because we know that's important. The group support from others is, again, something that younger girls need. They really enjoy that belonging that comes with that support, that encouragement. So for me, that circuit training is a really important part.
Cool.
And something I would really encourage if there is anyone listening to this or who coaches women or girls or is in that space, like get in touch, and we can create something. It's super easy and even better if we can do it in nature. Amazing. Should we talk about supplements?
Yep.
Because I think that's a really important one.
Okay.
Especially for athletes, but also for well-being. The first one is creatine.
So just general supplements for women, just for healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we know there are things that are lacking in food these days, with where they're grown effectively. So our soils are more deficient in a number of minerals. So it is very difficult for us to get what we need from, fruit and vegetables, meat, other products. For me, I think supplements is a kind of a game changer, especially if you're an athlete, because again, that increases stress level. We're using things up far more. Let's start with creatine, because that is my number one that I recommend for clients, especially athletes. Dr. Stacey Sims, she says it's the number one supplement that many women still aren't taking, and it is literally, if as close to a silver bullet as possible for many things. From an athlete, so what is creatine? It's a naturally occurring substance that is contained in our muscle cells, which helps us create energy, and especially in high intensity type exercise. For athletes, the major benefits, it's effectively a performance enhancer, but a legal one. So it increases strength, power, aerobic and anaerobic fitness. So it's huge. It also improves brain health, which I'll get to in a minute in terms of concussion prevention. Has positive effects on mood, and aids in COVID recovery if that's a thing, and also aids in concussion recovery by reducing inflammation. Not only does it help recovery from concussion, but also it's neuroprotective. So we should be taking that on a daily basis, because again, it's a massive anti-inflammatory, so it's lowering that inflammation that we know for women is increased anyway. So that's why we call it sort of neuroprotective, because it's lowering that inflammation in our brain as well as our body. It also, from a gut GI distress point of view, if that is a thing for any athletes or any people out there who exercise, creatine is also really good at reducing GI distress by kind of reducing the length of time that sort of erosion starts in our gut, which can be as little as 30 minutes if it's really high intensity exercise. So it kind of prolongs that time as well. Just 5 milligrams a day. It's tasteless, odorless. I usually just chuck in the smoothie, but you can just put it in water. It's pretty cheap and you can get it anywhere. Creatine monohydrate, 100%, it just needs to be that. But I highly recommend that. If you don't take it already, start taking it. The benefits are huge, and it has to be on a daily basis, because we use
consistency. Even if you're just going to the gym a couple times a week and exercise.
Nothing to do with that. Yep. Yeah. It doesn't have, just to me it's from a well-being and a performance aspect. Yep. And I've noticed it huge. You will, if you aren't taking it and you are someone who goes to the gym or who is an athlete, you'll notice the benefits. You're so much stronger in the gym.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible.
Cool.
And even the anaerobic and aerobic benefits.
Yeah.
So that's my first one. The other, I guess, top three would be fish oil, again, brain health, joint health, also a massive anti-inflammatory. Magnesium. So magnesium is, I think, involved in something like over 600 processes in the body. So it has a massive role to play. And a lot of people can be deficient in magnesium Also improves sleep, which we all need. And then vitamin D would be the other one, especially in winter. Again, there's a vitamin D deficiency around the world. I think it's they're calling it an epidemic at the moment. So I would recommend 1,000 international units of that per day, especially if you're an athlete. Again, we're going to be using more up through exercise, and you'll notice huge benefits with that. So that would be my sort of top 4. However, I wouldn't.
All at the health store, basically.
All at the local health store.
Yep.
Just make sure it's good quality. There's many New Zealand brands that do their own thing, so I would support that. Okay, let's maybe circle back
That's good.
a step to something that one is really important as a woman, but also from working with our physiology standpoint, and that's high intensity interval training. So I've touched on it before, especially if we're moving or exercising for well-being, then we can do specific high intensity work. Optimally, we'd do it 3 times a week, no more. Again, it's going to load the system too much.
Would you do that even at the later stages of your cycle?
No.
3 times a week? Okay.
No, so that would just be in the first half of our cycle.
Okay.
And high intensity interval training is training where our heart rate is we call it like 80% of our max heart rate, or rate of perceived effort 8 out of 10. So if you think 10 out of 10 is like all out, can't go any harder, and you can only do that for about 20 seconds, 8 out of 10 is a little notch down. The work intervals are between 1 and sort of 4-ish minutes. They can be longer, and then variable rest. And our sort of work rest ratio is around sort of 1 to 2-ish, but it can change. The benefits of high intensity interval training from a woman's perspective, body composition changes, so increases lean mass, decreases fat composition, obviously increases our anaerobic fitness, and also we're creating that good stress, let's call it, because our body needs that from an adaptation point of view, and that's in that first half of our cycle. So that's where we can really hit it hard. Plyometrics, I normally sort of tag on to high intensity interval training, and just to give you an example, what does that look like? It can be, if you're a runner, it can be hill reps, it can be going up a minute and then walking back down for a few minutes and doing that sort of 6 times. If you're not a runner, it can be anything. It can be rowing, it can be dancing, it can be kettlebell swings, it can be burpees. Something that gets your heart rate up, and then you're resting. And and the work is pretty, might be 45 minutes, but little as half an hour. Sprint interval training, which is the shortest form of that, is kind of the most effective. And if you're time pressured, it is the most effective. You can do it in as little as 4 minutes, which is a Tabata, which is 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds rest, times 8 rounds. That's ideally doing some form of cardio exercise, because you've got to go 10 out of 10 rate of perceived effort. It's super
3 times
maximal.
a week or a couple
No,
times a week?
2. You only do 2 because they're really hard. And then sprint interval training is effectively 20 seconds or less work. So you can do varying degrees of that, but the Tabata 4 minutes, start there if you've never done it before, because you're going to get huge benefits out of it. And the number one thing is body composition change, the increase in lean
For
mass.
people that might not know, what is Tabata?
It's just the name of that protocol. 20 seconds
10
on, 10 off, times 8.
Yeah. What sort of exercises would you?
Anything cardio related. So ideally it's would be like running, riding, rowing, assault bike. But you could do things like burpees or kettlebell swings as well.
Yeah.
But it's literally all out, and you can't do any more
Okay.
in 20 seconds. Like, it's full knacker. The other thing I will say, just in regard to that, I have many clients which say I can't do high intensity interval training. I'm not fit enough. And that simply is not true. Everybody can go there hard, because going hard is individual. When you get fitter, things don't get easier. You just get faster, and you get better at recovering. But it never gets easier, because that's not the point. You were meant to go hard. So I really want to dispel that myth of I can't do it because I'm not fit enough. Doesn't matter. It's just that you're going to be doing it slightly different to me. It doesn't matter. The point is going hard. So really keep that in mind for those of you who are looking at it from a well-being perspective, or from a plyometrics.
To push yourself mentally is something as well. It makes normal life easy.
Yes. Yep.
So it's a good
doing hard things.
Yeah.
Massively important, especially in this day and age. We need to increase our resilience. We need to increase that mental capacity.
Yeah.
That is a really good way of doing it.
Cool.
Because you are, what I like to call the 10 out of 10 zone, is an uncomfortable place where not many people have been. It is where every cell of your body is yelling at you to stop. And that's the place. And many people have never been there before. As soon as it starts getting hard, they stop.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but we want to keep going, because what's on the other side of that? Magic. And people just never get there.
Yeah.
So it's about, and that's again why with Strong Wahine, having that support or accountability person as me is really important. And it doesn't necessarily need to be one-on-one. It can be online. That's massive. I can literally work with anyone around the country if it's from that point of view, or like creating a program or creating a new way of kind of what their life looks like from a holistic standpoint. But that's where that is really important, and people, until you try, you just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And having drive and support from someone that's done it's incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think that support person is huge, especially when we're doing something new, because we do potentially have that level of fear or uncertainty, or just being a little nervous about it, and that's okay. That's normal. Like I said, that was me. And that's where I come in, or whether, your friend or your mum or sister or whatever it is, comes in, because I think, especially from a changing lifestyle perspective, so making this a lifestyle change, so forever, comes in, because we want it to be that way. We don't want to do this thing for 12 weeks, 6 weeks or 2 weeks and give up. We want it to be, and that's why creating change has got to be individual to each person. What is it, what's actually realistic for you is not realistic for someone else. And again, that goes for professional athletes. Like, what is good for me is not necessarily good for the next person, or maybe you need to tweak things slightly as well. So
in time, everyone's juggling different things at particular stages
Yeah.
of their life.
Yep. And it's just about having that conversation of what is, like, even with each training session or before a game, having that conversation of what does stress levels look like session by session, because then we're really making sure that we're not overstressing the system. And that is physical, mechanical and life stress.
Yeah.
Because we, do we need to mitigate things further with nutrition or rest or something to be able to get the most out of you for when you need it. Because at the end of the day, it's about the race or the game. It's not necessarily about each individual training session. It's about the longevity and consistency of that, getting the most out of yourself. Yeah.
Cool.
So plyometrics we haven't yet talked about.
Okay.
Really important for women from building bone perspective. We know from the age of 30, again, like with muscle loss, it decreases.
Do you want to talk about plyometrics? Just explain what it is.
Yeah, well, yep. So plyometrics is any explosive movement which goes against gravity. So a lot of people think of it as just jumping or hopping, but it's not. There's actually lower body, upper body and core plyometrics. The most basic and easiest way to get plyometrics in for anyone, regardless of whether you're an athlete or not, is star jumps. 20 star jumps significantly increases your bone density. And anyone can do that. Just do it in your warm-up, or just do it in the morning when you get up. But it can be things like, I love slam balls, battle ropes are really good for upper body ones if people can't jump. box jumps, mountain climbers for core work. So there's a whole range of options that we can do, especially if people can't just jump. However, as women, it's hugely important, regardless of whether you're an athlete. People just think, well, I run. It's not enough. That impact needs to be pretty severe. If you're new to it, start easy. Just do sort of 2 lots of 10 or even 5s if you're doing star jumps. If you're doing something else, so we ease into it because there's a lot of load. But we need to incorporate that into our training as well if we're not already doing it, regardless of what sport we play. Again, it's about strengthening our bones and our joints and our ligaments. So keep that in mind.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just actually had a question. So you went to uni, studied, became a forensic police scientist. How did that career help you with this, and why did you decide to go through into, not specifically, but what made you get into this from that career? You know, what was the change? But is it to do with well-being and improve the quality of your lifestyle instead of in a bogged down job working inside, probably looking at test pots and stuff?
No, that was more interesting than that.
Is that what you're doing, like with the lights?
No, that wasn't my area. There's like 7 different units in forensics. But, so, yeah, I think I touched on it at the start, but within my kind of police career, I was an athlete, and that's where my first kind of interest from a performance standpoint came from. Okay, what can I do from a nutrition standpoint, training standpoint, resting, recovering standpoint, can I do to be optimal in the given sport I was doing at the time? And so that was sort of like in parallel with, okay, well, I've got to work from X to X per day, and this gives me so many hours in the day to train and then rest and recover, etc. That's kind of, I guess my journey started when I entered triathlon, which was sort of at the beginning of my police career. Yeah, I just thought, okay, never done anything like this before, but let's have a look at what kind of the mainstream literature looks like around being optimal. And so that's kind of what I based my training on, and then I did eventually get a coach, which was good, but again I felt like they didn't really understand me, so that didn't last long, and I went back to myself kind of coaching me. And then this was maybe 2 years, and then I qualified for Worlds, and I thought, I guess I kind of started, because I was like, whoa, that's awesome, like, would be really cool to do well. Maybe I need a coach, like, because I was new, you know, I was only 2 years in, didn't really know. So I did get a coach, and there was sort of me, and then there was 4 other guys, and we were sort of the top in Wellington at the time. And the coach we had she was a woman, however, she had come from a base of being this really tough, hard woman triathlete, which worked back in like the 80s. So she was all about just volume, and just like high intensity all the time. Which obviously I know now was completely detrimental to me as a woman, and I noticed it. So I got to the point, I remember one training day we'd done a swim and we were doing a ride, and I got out the door on my bike, started going up this like rise, not a hill, a rise, and I was like, man, I just had nothing. I had no energy, and I was like, why is this so hard? This is crazy, like what has happened? And I struggled through the session, and I remember getting home, and I said to my then husband, like, something's not right, like this is what happened today. And it's like it had never happened to me before. And I was just like, man. And I said to my coach, I was like, what's going on? And then one of the athletes at the time had a nutritionist wife, so go and see her. Went through all of that, and actually my nutrition was fine. Not once did anybody within that kind of realm go, maybe you're training too much. And I guess I was overridden by the coach and her mentality. It's like, well, she's a coach, she's been there, she knows what she's doing. And I kind of gave away my power in many regards. yeah, and so kind of looking back then, it was like, just too much stress load. I was literally doing everything at high intensity. There was no easy days. I remember having it was like easy run day, and it was like a 90-minute run. It's like, and I'm doing standard distance triathlon, which is like 10k run. It's like, what? But I know now exactly what happened. And so that, because of that, I ended up going to Worlds, and we all underperformed. All 5 of us, because we had just such a massive training load, because that's what they used to do in the 80s, and it worked back then. We had all this hard-nosed, like, just work harder attitude. Doesn't work now, especially with an increase in life stress in modern life. It just is. So for me, I can look back and go, oh yeah, that was where it's all went wrong. So for me, that was probably a bit of a turning point after that. So I decided to not do standard distance triathlon after that. I went into Ironman and then went back to training myself. But again, that was based on the current literature, which was based on men. And again, you can just see the same pattern repeating. I got injured before my race. Even though, like I said, I still did well from an outside perspective, I didn't reach my potential. So that was also another kind of turning point. So that was where my real interest in, that's where it kind of went, I guess, when I then dipped into trail running. After that was more where that thought was like, oh, maybe I should go into well-being. And I didn't know about women's well-being at that point, that came later. But that was where my kind of passion, I guess, was shifting towards at the time for maybe starting a career in the well-being space.
That's cool. And you were being inspired by these 2 women, Stacey and Molly?
Yeah, so Stacey was the
Americans?
first one. Not Stacey's here in New Zealand.
Cool.
Molly is American, but Stacey, she's the world leader in women's physiology and performance and has been for 25 years.
Awesome.
And only in the last decade, probably more 5 years or so, have we really, as her message got out there, that actually as women we need to do it differently. And so it's becoming far more mainstream. You know,
There's not many women, sorry to cut you off, but there's not many women leaders in terms of physical health and that, is there? There's not as many as you would think.
Yeah.
50% of the population, that many.
Yeah, and then there's even, there's still an even smaller percentage of those people in the fitness and health industry that understand women's physiology and that we need to do it differently. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about getting this message out there, because it's so critical and it's so important to our well-being.
Yeah.
For as women, we need to do it differently. And I've said that a number of times, but it's crucial.
Yeah.
Changing the paradigm is where we need to go. We need to just do what we need to do to be optimal. Like, men are being optimal, awesome. Now it's our turn to actually reach our potential. And that's why I started Strong Wahine. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Good on you to change. Did you want to finish on the sleep aspect, or?
Just, I think briefly, like just again highlighting the importance of sleep. 7 to 9 hours is a minimum. As an athlete, you're probably heading more towards 10. And that's quality sleep. And there's a couple of key things that I will say around sleep, and that screen time is such a critical one. You need to turn it off an hour minimum, ideally 2, because it is such a circadian disruptor. That blue light is literally telling our brain that it's midday. So you can see why people have sleep issues when it's nighttime and we're being bombarded by it's lunchtime. So that's really critical. And then just having a really good relaxing bedtime routine. I'm a reader. I like reading, so reading is my thing, and I do that before I go to bed. For me, that's a really nice relaxer. It gets me away from all the screen things if that's an issue. But it's also just good for relaxing. So finding that something, whether it's having a cup of tea, whether it's just sitting down and chatting to your partner, or whether it is reading or doing something else relaxing.
Winding down.
Just winding down is super important.
Consistently is the key though, eh?
But sleep, we talk about, in the triathlon world, like fourth discipline, which is nutrition. It's the same with well-being. Sleep is like critical to one, being optimal as an athlete, but also well-being. Like without it, people just think it's this thing we can not have much of and still function.
Yeah.
We can't. You know, at some point, again, it's creating more stress. It will come back to haunt you at some point. So for me, really prioritize that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sleep, nutrition, mindset,
Strength training.
movement. Yeah. Strength training, high intensity interval training, plyometrics. Add those into your current regime. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's wrap it up. Thanks for speaking to me today about all the things specific for women's training and well-being, and awesome. Cheers.
Thank you.